Hi. So I'm live here, and I'm live here on Twitter, I believe. We'll see in a second. So I may not be as articulate as I usually am, but I will do my best. One of the reasons why I wanted to go live today is because of what is happening in Texas right now. And if you can't hear me, please let me know. Hi. Thanks for saying hi to me. If you are on Facebook or Twitter and you can't hear me, please let me know. But I think you should be okay. So a couple things. First, you see that I'm wearing this shirt. On Twitter, it says "Thank God for Abortion," and a friend of mine, Viva Ruiz, is the one who started this organization. I think you know that I discuss narratives. I discuss narratives a lot of the time. And a big part of narratives is actually symbolism. And so you can see on this shirt, on this Thank God for Abortion shirt, there's a dove with the hands. And these are symbolism that are used, iconography that's used in Catholicism. And for some of you that don't know, my undergraduate degree is in comparative religion. I studied the Quran, I studied the Torah, I studied the Bible, I studied Taoism, Jainism, Buddhism. And I actually really loved studying religion. And I think for me, it was easier to study religion because I was somebody where I didn't grow up inside a religion. My mother was more spiritual. I grew up in New Mexico, and New Mexico has a lot of religions. I'm going to come back to abortion in a moment, but I'm want to give you some groundwork here. So I grew up, I was in synagogues when I was a child. I went to Baptist churches when I was a child. I went to Native ceremony as a child. Yearly in New Mexico, they have what's called the annual powwow, where different tribes and clans come from all over the United States, and they get into the stadium and celebrate every year. So I grew up around the fact that religion and how people celebrated it was attached to culture, was attached to spirituality. There was traditions involved. And it really wasn't until I met my husband who grew up Catholic, that I saw just really how damaging sometimes religion can be, right? I did know this already, but for him growing up in the Catholic Church, there was lots of abuse in the Catholic Church. And, but at the same time, that's not to demean people that are still very attached to the Catholic Church and people who feel connected or feel some grace with that. And the reason why I bring up religion and discussing it today is because one of the things that's happening in Texas right now with this Texas bill, it's called the Senate Bill 8. It's also called it's a heartbeat bill. And they're using religion to kind of weaponize this bill to prevent women from getting, anyone with uterus from having an abortion as early as 6 weeks. And for a lot of people, when they get pregnant, sometimes you don't know you're pregnant at 6 weeks. I know that's shocking for some, but some people don't know yet. So it's a very restrictive. This is a very restrictive law what's going on. And they are weaponizing religion within it. And so Viva Ruiz, she's an artist who started this group called Thank God for Abortion. And I think one of the things that she was doing with it is I think she was kind of calling out some of the hypocrisy within it because one, she's religious and she said, I believe that God celebrates this. How do we know that God doesn't? And she's an artist, so she wanted to be really bold about it and reuse the symbols of the religion. because, like I said, the dove and the hands have a large symbolism to it. Symbolizes, dove can symbolize God's grace. It could symbolize peace, all of these things, right? So she attached that to abortion. And by the way, Catholics get abortions. Jewish people get abortions. Atheists get abortions. Conservatives get abortions. So we know that this, narrative around abortion is not correct. It's hypocritical for how Republicans are posing it, right? They're posing it as something like, these Republicans in Texas are posing it as something like they're trying to save a life. And we've already known that that's complete hypocrisy, because if they actually cared about life, they would care about poverty. They would care about harm. They would want to stop interpersonal violence. They would want to make sure that our gun laws protected Americans, on and on and on. So we know that this is a really hypocritical move in Texas. And you know that I'm a voting rights advocate, and I want you to know that voting rights and abortion access are tied together, hand in hand. There is nothing that separates those two things. It's painful. Our country is really going through more of a painful mark again. It's been going through it since its inception. You can't start a country by enslaving people and genocides and then, pretend that we don't have issues, right? We know that we have issues as a country, and we've had moments of progress. And I think that for a lot of us, for myself in particular, we hold on to those moments of progress and try to push forward to more of them. But right now we're dealing with the fact that Republicans are still winning the war of words. And they're doing it because the way they're doing it is incredibly vicious. Even calling this abortion bill the heartbeat bill is incredibly vicious. You can hear why they're calling it that. They're trying to say the sanctity of this life is precious. They don't think that the sanctity of the person carrying the fetus is precious, because if a woman, if a person who is pregnant, if they are raped, if there is incest, if there is medical, if they're in an abusive relationship, if there's medical issues, they don't care. You can't get an abortion after this time period, after 6 weeks. So we're waiting to hear what the Supreme Court's going to do. They're supposed to say something around 5 p.m., which is why I wanted to talk about it before the ruling happens. But I want to attach it back to voting rights, because, having access unimpeded to abortion, which is a healthcare issue, this is a civil rights issue. It's an economic issue. It's a gender issue. It's all of them together. And we can't have access to any of these things if we don't have voting rights. This is why they're restricting our voting rights. This is why they're restricting abortion rights. They're trying to do everything to make us exhausted. And honestly, it works. I'm going to switch to a little bit talking about Washington, D.C. I went to Washington, D.C. this weekend to march for voting rights. And the vast majority of people that were in Washington, D.C. marching alongside me too were Black. And I really do think that because we know intimately how all of our issues are tied to access with the ballot box, whether it gives us the ability to vote in representation that truly sees us, that sees our issues, that will pick up policy that we care about, that cares about us, our humanity, our voting rights, our civil rights, on and on and on. But and there were white people there, but not enough. And it worried me about midterms. And I know I'm going to say it again. I know some people go, well, Maya, if you, it's only like five white women online that get mad at me for running against Carolyn Maloney. And they say, well, if you really cared about midterms, you wouldn't be running. You would be helping these other people, helping this other woman win. First of all, my district, almost 60% voted against her last time. It's a D35 plus district, which means it's going to stay in Democrats' hands. And two, I'm sorry, but Maloney just has not been as outspoken about all of these issues that I'm speaking about right now, and has not talked or articulated policies that really cut across talking about climate, how it attaches to racial justice, how it attaches to climate justice, how gender justice is going with economic justice, how, on and on and on, protecting trans kids' rights, on and on and on. I feel like there's so much missing right now from her policy platform. Not that I feel it, I know it, I've seen it, right? So I was in Washington, D.C. There were some representatives that spoke. All of them were Black, once again. I believe, let's see, Betty was there. Betty Joyce was there. Jamal Bowman was there. Cori Bush might have been there, but my representative wasn't there. And so it also showed me that there were a lot of representatives that couldn't be bothered to come back and just march and show a physical presence to discuss marching. I know some people could make the case, well, like, look, they're voting for voting rights. Isn't that enough? Yes, that is part of it. But voting rights right now, to me, is the most critical issue facing the country right now. And you could say, well, Maya, what about what's happening at the border? What about what's happening to abortion access? What's happening with the COVID recovery? All of those things are attached to voting rights. Because if we don't win midterms, if we can't access the ballot, if we cannot access the ballot box, if our country is being disenfranchised at the ballot box, then we're not going to be able to pass climate legislation that we care about, housing legislation that we care about, on and on and on. And so this is why right now voting rights is the biggest concern. I do not understand why people still do not get how those two issues are tied together. Okay, the last issue I'm going to talk about, because I'm waiting to see what the Supreme Court is going to say about what's going on in Texas. The last thing I'm going to say is right now, New York is still dealing with a crushing housing issue right now. And my friend Dustin and I were talking today. He was really frustrated because a couple of people, got a lot of credit for calling out a shelter that's really harmful in New York City. And it's a shelter that my friend Dustin stayed at for 20 weeks. And for a lot of you, if you've never stayed in a shelter, and I've never stayed in a shelter. Yes, my family was evicted when we were young, but we didn't stay in a shelter. My grandfather had a storage facility where he stored stuff in New Mexico, and we were able to still stay there. And that's where we stayed. And but the shelter systems, and I've worked in and out of shelter systems since I was 16 years old. I worked with shelters and elected officials when I was 16 in Sarasota and Tallahassee. I worked with them in Atlanta, and I worked with them here in New York City. And I've only ever been in one shelter that has been kind of nice. And I can't tell you which shelter what it is, because it's a shelter that's more like a secret shelter here in New York for people that have been abused. But most of the shelters in New York, New York spends a decent amount of money on the shelter system here in New York. And that I think could be reallocated to actually going to permanent housing. And it doesn't go to permanent housing. Instead, what it goes to is a shelter system. A lot of people make money off of shelter systems here in New York City. And when you find out how much is spent on the shelters here, and then you go and you find out, because I've talked to lots of people that have been in shelters here in New York City, and you find out that the food is rancid, and you find out that a lot of them are really inaccessible for people that use wheelchairs, and you find out the abuse that goes on in shelters, right? Because when I was younger and I used to ask people that were unhoused, I would say, do you want me to help you get to a shelter? And they would say, I don't want to stay at the shelter. And when I was younger, I'd say, well, why don't you want to? Because, I was younger, I was naive, I'm 16, I didn't know. And they would say to me, I would rather sleep in the streets than be in the shelter. I said, why? And they would explain to me, Maya, sometimes I get robbed, sometimes I get harmed. I don't really feel safe there. I don't think that the people really actually care about my humanity in the shelter. I would rather take the risk on the street, right? And this is people that I've talked to for years: Sarasota, Tallahassee, Atlanta, New York, all the shelter systems, right? So to me, of course, and at the federal level, we have a certain amount of money that gets allocated every year. Some of it's like permanently earmarked for things like Medicaid, Social Security, but some of it, other money of it, is we can move around. And our country has enough money and wealth in it where no one should have to worry about having access to permanent housing. Not one person in the country should. I mean, it is a tragedy what happened in Afghanistan. It is a tragedy what we did to Afghanistan. It is a tragedy all around, right? There was over 100,000 people's lives lost. For people that were in Afghanistan, we heard that some of them liked the progress that had happened there while Americans were there. At the same time, some people that were in Afghanistan were upset with how the Americans' presence that was there. And then at the same time, we also know that we spent $2 trillion in Afghanistan. So we know that we have the money and the resources to actually allocate to housing, to education. The money is there. And I think Republicans have gotten away for too long with saying, well, that's not your money. That's our money. No, it's all of our money, right? And none of us really get a say on it. We really don't get a say too much about whether we want this amount of money to go to weapons of war or things like that. And just like abortion, just like if we want abortion to be paid for by getting rid of the Hyde Amendment, and right now the Hyde Amendment has not thankfully been reauthorized, that, for Republicans, they don't want that to happen, So all of us have an opinion about how the budget should go, right? I'm not articulating that well, but all of us have an opinion about how the budget should be allocated. But one of the things that we know, that to me, I know for sure that should not be controversial, is that we should be making sure that everyone in America is housed. That should be uncontroversial. I also think abortion should be uncontroversial. I mean, a lot of people, like I said, will see me wearing this shirt and be like, Maya, right? Especially if they're from the Catholic religion. Because my husband saw me put this shirt on once, and he was just like, "Oh my God!" Even though he's a recovering Catholic, the symbolism of it was really shocking to him. But I think that we've allowed for too long to let the right wing frame for our country and our media what is controversial, what is not, what we're allowed to spend money on, what we're not allowed to spend money on, right? What we can or cannot spend money on. And I think that we have to be really done with that. We have to be really done with thinking things like abortion, which is a healthcare issue. We have to stop thinking of it as controversial. It is not controversial. It's not controversial for a person to get one abortion. It is not controversial for them to get 3 abortions. I'm sorry. And for those Republicans that are like clutching their pearls and saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe she said that." And I said I'm using a Southern accent because I lived in the South. Okay, so I can do that. These are the same people who's, they've had someone in their life that's had an abortion, maybe unbeknownst to them, or maybe they asked them to get one, and they still, love them. So I'm hoping, as I run in my campaign, I'm hoping that I can start bringing a demystification to certain things. I'm tired of us having to fight for our basic decent humanity, right? I'm tired of immigrants and refugees and undocumented people having to show us their worth instead of just us knowing, yes, they should be treated decently and they should have a pathway to citizenship, and immigrants and refugees that are here should have resources that they have access to, and on and on and on. So I hope that can be shown throughout my campaign. Anyways, I am going to wait to see what this Supreme Court says. I hope you all enjoy your day. That's it. I'll go live next Tuesday. I'm sorry I was not as articulate as I usually am, but I'm very tired. In DC, I walked like at least, I think my step meter said I walked like 30,000 steps. I don't even know what that is, but it's definitely a lot. Okay? So enjoy the rest of your day. I hope that Texas works. I hope that the Supreme Court comes through for us because it has a conservative majority. I'm not going to count on it, but let's see what happens. Okay? Bye.